Oh, hello, my good men. As you probably know, I am Socrates of Athens. I'm certain you're familiar with my ideas and studies through my dear student and lifelong follower, Plato.
Indeed I have. My name is Immanuel Kant of Königsberg, Germany, but with my informal peers I go simply by Kant.
Of course, and I am Jerry Bentham of Britain.
So, we have all been summoned to this part of America to resolve a conflict within a high school. How important could this issue be?
More important than you could imagine. According to authoritative figures within the school board, multiple students have been charged with breaking Level 2 violations and have been punished accordingly. However, many of these students have been arguing that A, the act he or she has committed should not be punishable, as it is both just and morally sound, and or B, the punishment that was sentenced against them was not fitting to the crime committed.
Precisely. We must be thorough in our investigations so that this problem does not arise in the future, especially due to this school's prestigious reputation being vulnerable.
Fair enough.
Let us begin with the violation of lying. I have been informed that a second-year student was given 2 detentions for claiming his friend completed assigned homework on a day he was absent, when in truth, his friend chose not to do it. Would you two say this violation and its punishment are reasonable? Emmanuel, you start.
The violation and punishment are absolutely reasonable, for lying in itself is wrong. Even if the student was trying to defend his friend from future trouble, his choice to lie was morally incorrect. The context of his decision is thus irrelevant. Is it fair to the students, teachers, and even this area to make a false claim? No. As a whole, the decision would work to crumble that we humans know as integrity. Therefore, I support keeping the ruling intact.
I disagree with you, Emmanuel. I believe that in some cases, lying is perfectly acceptable. If the lie benefits more than it harms, what is the problem, Mr. Kant? In this scenario, the student and his friend would benefit because they avoided trouble. Now, would the anger be by the teacher outweighing this benefit? No. In fact, this teacher may brush it aside quickly, while the students could be affected greatly by the one lie. How do you feel about this issue, Socrates?
See, I do understand the student's action in attempting to defend his friend. It seems reasonable to stand up for a companion in that way. Perhaps the rules that were initially made were unfair, yet because they do exist, we must abide by them. Page 68 of the school's official handbook reads, "Behaviors whose frequency or seriousness disrupts the learning climate of the school include lying." All students are required to read and agree to this guide, so it is the fault of the student to not follow it. We must continue to follow through with the outlined punishments when these violations occur, because choosing not to corrupts what has been established thus far. The student must accept the detentions he's received.
Perhaps the accepted authority has the power, yet in my opinion, the personal obligation of the student to not lie carries more weight.
There's certainly weight in that decision to lie, but if there is good reason for the student to directly go against authority, then we must respect that. I'm simply attempting to emphasize that the student cannot avoid the consequences.
Those consequences are not fair, Socrates. Those 2 detentions would be far worse than one lie. They prolong the controversy and serve no immediate good.
Jeremy, this surely is not about the immediate good. It's rooted in making a decision that can be used again and again in the future. The student can learn from his actions and influence other students by doing so. Let's move on to a more serious offense. The handbook notes that Level 2 violations result in 2 punishments chosen by the school. Recently, a female student was suspended for calling one of her classmates by a derogatory and vulgar name. Her peer took no offense to the remark. However, the teacher of the class took action towards this behavior and sent the student to the disciplinary office. After a good deal of discussion, the administrator cited the Level 2 section of the handbook, calling the behavior and language abusive and vulgar. As a result, this girl was given an out-of-school suspension and a mandatory parent conference. Now the matter of discussion. Should this girl's act have been punishable, and if so, was the given punishment worthy of her actions?
In this case, my belief is that the girl should be punished, solely as she had no inspiration or motive to use vulgar language as she did here. Only if it meant pursuing a moral cause would her actions be considered acceptable. Maybe using vulgar language would assist one in making a point. If they feel they have a duty that happens to entail such language, it would be okay.
Here, I'll have to agree with you, Socrates, as this young woman's actions were committed with no sense of reason in mind. She completely lacked responsibility and morality with no true defense of what she did. It is therefore an unjust incident. I completely believe that she should be punished accordingly.
I think that this act was avoidable. The student did not have to use this language in this scenario. But if we look at the offense as a whole, it appears to be unfair. I know that a high majority of teens use this type of language regularly. Their collective expressions and common use of the language towers over the response of a few individuals, even if, as the handbook reads, it disrupts the learning climate of the school.
So you're putting forth the notion that because students enjoy using this unappealing language, they should be rewarded for it? That's preposterous.
Preposterous. It is practical, Mr. Kant.
However, Jeremy, you fail to see the lack of reason and morality within this girl's actions. The biggest argument as to why she should be punished is that she had no motive to speak the way she did.
I think that this is a fair statement, but I maintain my beliefs. Finally, we have learned of another crucial Level 2 violation. Just last week, a male student in his last year at Radnor High School had received an after-school detention for cutting class. However, this student refused to serve his detention and outright skipped it. I guess his tendency to miss mandatory events is strong. Anyway, the next morning, he was referred to the principal to sort out his behavior. In this case, he was not punished, putting into question the handbook and Level 2 violations specifically. Socrates, I must ask your opinion first. Should the boy have been punished?
Yes. Today we've discussed the punishments of the various violations. Through it all, I have assumed that a punishment should always be put in place. So when the principal chooses not to punish a student, I am forced to object. The guidelines of the handbook are clear. When rules are broken, 2 consequences will follow. I believe it's wrong of the principal to not follow the handbook because he is one of the figures that is supposed to embody it. Students and staff have to respect the rules, always. Even when they seem unjust, they are required to, since these rules are responsible for everything that is Radnor High School. Without the rules, there would be no order or productivity here. Now, the specific violation of the student was wrong. There was no moral justification of his action to cut the detention, as far as we know. Without any justification, it is clear to me that the student's behavior was handled improperly, and punishment should have been given.
I agree with your opinion on the lack of necessity to skip the assigned detention, Socrates. But for a different reason, my stance on the issue is since the cutting of the detention served only a tiny benefit. Which is the pleasure of a student? The action of a student is less favorable than abiding by the rules. His insignificant joy gain does not compare to the potential cost, which are the anger of his parents. With that being said, I actually support not punishing the boy. We must ask, would this punishment truly prevent any greater wrongdoing in the future? I don't believe so. This boy obviously had used to be cutting class at detention, so imposing discipline would not be very effective. Nothing would change, and no superior wrong would be defeated in this process.
I strongly disagree with you, Jeremy. I support the notion that implementing punishment could go far. The boy will gradually lose the motivation to act against the rules because he will no longer tolerate all the negative effects and consequences. If the principal did take action and follow the handbook as he is supposed to, then perhaps this controversy would be over with. Sometimes taking a stand has power, but dissent without authentic moral weight means nothing.
Right. It's important to realize the meaning or lack of meaning behind the student's actions.
I disagree. Who are we to say which actions have significance and which do not? Really, the relative value of what we pursue is subjective.
All right. Let's move on. We've clearly established that we often disagree when it comes to specific violations. With that aside, how about we discuss the Level 2 category as a whole? I think it's vital to interpret the magnitude of these violations and compare them, while understanding how their punishments correspond.
I've been wanting to bring this topic up. Overall, all of the violations are indeed morally wrong. When we consider making them, it should come down to knowing whether or not our options could be applied to all situations. As we discussed, lying is wrong. So, no matter the scenario, we as beings with dignity should be sure to never lie. But I do recognize that these violations and their punishments cannot be put on the same level. The system the school has put in place is flawed. Their ability to assign similar punishments to very different misbehaviors does not work. If a student can merely refuse to show their school ID and then be given the same punishment that, say, for example, gambling violation calls for, we must make revisions. Perhaps implementing exact punishments for exact violations will be better for the school in its entirety.
I will have to agree with Emmanuel's opinion here. Ever while we seem to always disagree, I do believe that more pain is brought about in response to Level 2 violations. There is simply too much variation in the different acts that can be punished in the same way. Strictly following my philosophical beliefs, I'll follow Kant's example. It can be unanimously agreed upon that gambling and its effects bring much more downside to the majority of the school than one student simply refusing to show their school ID. Yet, in the student handbook, they can be found in the same list side by side. There is no possible logical instance in which these two acts can be punished similarly and it is simply unjust.
Very well then. I'm glad we can agree for once. What I think is important is to add is that page 65 of the handbook clearly quotes, appropriate behavior is critical in order to create a healthy and safe school environment. This helps us understand the intentions of the school. Surely there will have no objection to our agreed stance that revising the handbook is a must, as it would only build on the desired goal. When this is said and done, and we head back to our respective countries, I hope this school listens to our viewpoints and digests the need for change. Our conflicting viewpoints on many issues still work to resolve conflicts, and in that, we've done our job. Thank you both for your insight.
Anytime, I look forward to seeing how the school responds to the problem it has faced.
Thank you, Socrates. Hopefully we have made a difference here.